Welcome back to Tiny Grimes Games, and I'm here with a Keyforge video. I know it's been a while since I made one of these, but there were some massive game-altering erratas that were just dropped, and I wanted to put my opinion out there on these errata. Feel free to disregard it if you like, but I just thought I'd add my thoughts to the matter. Okay, so two big errata, library access and bait and switch. Let's look at them real quick. Library access basically says when you play it, you have to purge it, which, to be honest, like with how we originally played library access, this doesn't change anything, right? We thought library access was really strong when you could just sculpt a hand full of logos cards with the archives and then go boom, draw 8 cards, and you usually just won off that. But that's not what's been making it so broken lately. And it's cool that the developers give us this whole breakdown of why it is that it's being errated. It's basically to stop the Nephilim Seed, Reverse Time, Infinite decks that are both annoying to play against and annoying to play against. And they're super strong when they go off. And they're just really annoying, and I'll come back to that in a bit. The other card that was altered in a huge way is bait and switch. Bait and switch has been a boogeyman of the game since it was released. From day one, tons of people said, oh, this card is totally busted. And what's interesting is, in the article here, it doesn't seem to say that it's totally busted, but that it's really shuts down metagame diversity, which I can agree with quite a bit. Like, I have a pile of decks, and if they don't have bait and switch in them, and their Shadows decks, I'm immediately kind of going, well, doesn't have bait and switch, like it's not that good of a deck. But it's a huge nerf. It goes from you may steal infinite mana to, not mana, Amber to you may steal 2 Amber max. And I think that is really interesting. I'm going to come back to that as well. So let's start with my thoughts on the bait and switch errata. I'm really torn on this because on the one hand, I'll start with the positives. So the positives are that this basically neuters a broken degenerate combo deck, and to be perfectly honest, this combo is one of the reasons why I have played Keyforge substantially less than before, because the whole beauty of Keyforge is supposed to be open a couple decks. One of them is going to be a 4 out of 5 on the John Bruno deck rating scale, and take it to a tournament. And sure, maybe someone has an even better deck, but they're not going to be that much better. But these library access Nephilim Seed decks totally broke the format and were way too good. And it took the FFG a long time to errata this, and I think the reason is because they thought, like, well, there just aren't that many of them, and that's what people in the community said. They're like, so what? So you get beat on the Crucible by one of these. There's only like 3 in existence, and they're all in the Crucible. But we know how people work, right? Like, as more of these get opened, the top-level competitive players want them. People are willing to spend tons of money for them. And I feel like that's bad for the game, to have this possibility of spending tons and tons of money to have a substantially better deck. It kind of like violates the whole premise of Keyforge. Now, you shouldn't be able to just open one deck and be like, what? Why isn't my deck amazing? Sure, maybe open 12 decks, maybe open 13 decks, and you've got a pretty good deck. But to go to a tournament and have a deck like this show up, it's just not that fun, and it's kind of like, it feels like it's against the spirit of the game. And it also feels like it's a bit against the spirit of the game to spend like $1,000 on the deck, right? Like, that's kind of not what this game is about. So, on the one hand, I am not sad at all to see this nerf. I thought library access should be nerfed just even in its regular form in the beginning, let alone the completely degenerate, busted combo deck that came about. So, I'm not too sad there. I'm not super sad that there is no longer an option to buy a game-warping degenerate deck. The problem is there's still other tons of good decks, right? It's not like this is the only amazing deck. But I'm happy to see that. What I'm not happy to see, though, and I've seen some people are happy about this, is like, aha! This is retribution for those people who did spend $1,000. I don't feel like that at all. I feel terrible for those people. But I will say that I feel like if you've played any FFG games, or really any card games, when there is a completely degenerate combo deck, it's going to get nerfed. Like, that's just a fact. It's a reason why I wasn't willing to spend a lot of money on a deck like this. I mean, the first time I saw one, I was like, yeah, okay, that's the best deck in the game, but I'm not going to spend hundreds of dollars on a Keyforge deck, especially not on a degenerate, broken combo deck that is going to get nerfed. Like, FFG has historically never allowed these kinds of decks to hang around in their game. Most games haven't either, but FFG specifically doesn't do this. So I knew it was going to get nerfed, not with any sort of insider information, just like I played FFG games, which made it even more frustrating for me because I knew I couldn't buy into it because I knew it would get nerfed and then I would be out all this money. It was so frustrating having it around. But I do feel bad for those who did have their, $500 deck just get nerfed. And here's the main reason why. I feel like with Keyforge, FFG is trying to do something really interesting where they're kind of trying to say, like, hey, do you like Magic, but you don't want to play Standard because it costs you like $400 every couple months? Do you not like even Modern because cards can rotate out, or like something happens to the meta and your $1,000 Modern deck is suddenly not that good? Yeah, maybe hopefully you had some staples in there. But the cool thing about Keyforge has been this stuff doesn't rotate out. That's at least not our plan. You can buy a deck, get a good deck, and you can just play it forever. Yeah, if you win too many local tournaments, it's going to get chains, but whatever, who cares about that anyway, right? Like, as you move to the bigger events, it's not going to be chain-bound anymore. And yes, maybe it'll reach some mythical status where it gets removed from the game, but that's awesome anyway. You're like this legendary person who got their deck removed from the game because you're so amazing. That sounds great. But it had, like, this possibility of knowing, like, I could buy a deck, and it's going to be around for a long time, and they kind of flushed that feeling down the drain with this errata. Now, I'm not saying it was a bad choice. I'm just saying I think that's why it took them so long, right? They wanted to just kind of be able to shut their eyes and be like, it's 0.00001% of decks. We're fine. We don't need to errata. Enough of them have been opened. We're screwed. We have to. But it's interesting. I could see this errata and the bait and switch errata having a negative impact on the growth of the game as people look at it and kind of go, yeah, but you burned me once already, right? Like remember, I said the reason I didn't buy this is because I knew it would get nerfed, and then I didn't have the most competitive deck, and I'm a person who wants to have the most competitive deck, so I was frustrated, and it's just going to kind of encourage this cycle, and that in itself is frustrating. Okay, but overall, bottom line, yeah, obviously this had to be nerfed. Like, this was ridiculous. This is a broken, degenerate combo from the beginning. It had to be nerfed. That was obvious. Okay, let's move on to our next card, Bait and Switch. Did Bait and Switch need to be nerfed? I don't know. That's a hard one. I still say no. I think it is a cool card to have a punishment to the decks that want to just be like, boom, made 28 Amber, what you got? And your answer can be, I got Bait and Switch. I mean, there are other answers, but none as punishing as Bait and Switch. And so I really liked having Bait and Switch in the game. I loved being able to do cute, cool stuff like Miasma into Bait and Switch. I mean, they're usually going to have Keyforge anyway, or Key Charge, but if they don't, you've got them there. There's like so many cool plays you can set up with Bait and Switch. And I'm totally for capping it. Completely for capping at 6 sounds great. 4 seems totally reasonable. 2? What are you, out of your minds? Like, this card is already a highly situational card. You have to hold in your hand or put in the archives for several turns if you want to get any real return on it. I've played it several times for 2 just because it's kind of like, well, that's not the way this game is going. But 2 cap to me is absurd. And what really bothers me about it is that, yeah, it was hampering deck diversity, but guess what? A ton of people bought decks because they have Bait and Switch in it. And so you didn't just hurt that small handful of people that had the busted degenerate deck that they paid a lot of money for. That's fine. That deck shouldn't have been around anyway. But really, you're just like nerfing a good card, like a really good card, when there's lots of other really good cards. I think that's a bad idea. Like, I don't think they should be nerfing cards in this profound of a way if they want to say, like, our thing is you can buy a deck and then you can play with it. Like, almost every deck I have now is substantially worse because they are all Bait and Switch decks. And that has me in a really frustrated spot, right? Like, I didn't even have a busted deck, and now I don't even have a really good deck. All my really good decks got knocked down a peg to where I only just have, like, a bunch of pretty good decks. And that is really frustrating, and I don't think that was necessary. If you're worried about deck diversity, bump it down to 4. It's still good, like, really good, but it's not game-changing. I don't know. I just think this was a terrible decision, to be honest. I think making this down to 2 was a bad move. It hurts the value of a lot of people's decks out there. And maybe that's intentional, right? Maybe it's we printed new cards that we want to be able to compete with bait and switch, and so we're worried that the new sets won't be competitive, and we sort of learn from the first set. And I get that. Like, I get the need to nerf it. Nerfing it to from infinite to 2 is one of the biggest nerfs I've ever seen in a game, right? Like, there's almost no bigger of a nerf. And if there was some compensation for that, like, you get an amber when you're done, or something, but, like, this is a dead card plenty of times, and it's maxes 2. Like, seriously, this went from one of the very best decks in the very best cards in the format to a pretty blah card, and destroyed all my decks in one fell swoop. So, personally, I'm frustrated by it, and I think it, like the bait and switch, like the library access nerf, I think it takes a lot of, like, that credibility of you can rest easy knowing your decks are going to be fine. This rests all that away, because this wasn't a degenerate busted combo. This was just like, hey, here's a really good card. By the way, if you have a really good card, it may go away. It just might. That's really frustrating to me. So I'm not happy with the bait and switch nerf. Happy with the library access nerf. Curious to see what you guys think. I haven't been playing quite as much Keyforge, so maybe I'm too out of the loop on this, and bait and switch has just dominated like no other card. But I really don't see that is going to be the case. It says here it's helped House Shadows become the most played house at multiple vault tours. Just so you know, FFG, if you print all the best cards in one house that lets you steal all of your opponent's amber when no other house can, everyone's going to play that house. It's not just bait and switch. Stop printing all these steal cards in only Shadows. Okay, so again, hate bait and switch nerf, love library access nerf, want to hear what you guys think, and I don't know, maybe I'll be making some more Keyforge videos soon. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of the nerfs. Let me know what you think of the video. I'll talk to you soon.